A first-year student named Amina moves into dorm 3B on a humid August afternoon. She's nervous. The bed is stiff. Her roommate is still unpacking. And the posters on the wall don't yet feel like hers. But that night, and a dozen strangers from her floor in a circle for a conversation called home, not just housing. They talk about where they come from, their fears, their dreams. Weeks later, Amina's dorm hosts a faculty salon on climate ethics, then a journaling night, a pop-up food pantry, a spontaneous karaoke battle. And somewhere in that mess of ordinary moments, she doesn't just adjust, she begins to awaken. To community, to purpose, to herself. For many students, college begins not in a classroom, but in a dorm room. Residence life has long been seen as the social heart of the university. But what if it could also be its intellectual and moral soul? Welcome to Presidential Podcast on Student Affairs, Episode 4, The Dorm as Classroom, Reinventing Residence Life for the 21st Century. I am your host, Maya Quinn. Joining us today are three presidents who are rethinking what it means to live and learn on campus. Dr. Thomas Lang, president of Midland State University, a flagship public institution serving over 30,000 students. Dr. Evelyn Whitmore, president of Brookhaven University, a leading private research university known for its global initiatives. And Dr. Monica Alvarez, president of St. Brigid's University, a Catholic liberal arts college rooted in faith, ethics, and service. Presidents, welcome, and thank you for being here. Today, our roundtable explores this question. How can we reimagine residence life as a transformative space? Not just for living, but for learning and justice.
At Midland State, we house nearly 12,000 students, and for years, we treated residence life like a logistics operation. Bed assignments, keys, safety reports. But our retention data told a different story. Students who were actively engaged in residential learning communities stayed, thrived, and graduated at far higher rates. So we made a shift. We now embed co-curricular learning goals into every residence hall. RAS are trained not just in crisis response, but in dialogue facilitation, identity development, and peer mentoring. Some even co-lead first-year seminar extensions in the dorms. The dorm isn't just where students sleep, it's where they wake up to themselves.
That resonates. At Brookhaven, we've leaned into what we call intentional friction. We design residence halls not just for comfort, but for encounter. Students from different disciplines, countries, ideologies, living together and learning together. But we don't leave it to chance. Each residential floor has a theme, like democracy in practice or global citizenship, and includes structured dialogues, common readings, and service outings. Faculty and residents co-host monthly salons. And our student affairs staff are embedded into hall programming, not just for discipline, but for development.
That's beautiful, and I'll add. Residence life must also be a sanctuary, especially for vulnerable students. At St. Brigid's, we've redesigned our residence life model around the principle of radical hospitality. Inspired by our Catholic tradition, we now offer specialized housing communities for students with disabilities, queer and trans students, and first-gen scholars. But here's the key. These aren't segregated, safe zones. They're affirming ecosystems with specially trained RAS, spiritual counselors, and academic tutors. We also host quarterly rest and reflection retreats in the residence halls, mindfulness, communal meals, journaling. It's part healing, part pedagogy.
And it's not just about the students living on campus. We've extended our residence life ethos to commuter lounges and virtual dorm groups for students who can't afford housing. They still get access to peer mentors, programming, and social events, just structured around their lives.
We've also challenged the old hierarchy of residence life. At Brookhaven, our RAS are paid, mentored, and even eligible for a student teaching fellowship, where they present at student affairs conferences. Residence life is leadership development, not just a housing function.
Residence life must include reflection. We've created a digital Res Hall Journal app where students write short weekly prompts about community, purpose, identity. These are reviewed with consent by our hall directors, who use them to plan programs and identify struggling students. It's qualitative data, but it's also sacred listening.
How do you create residence life environments where students can engage in hard conversations about race, identity, power, and difference without retreating or shutting down?
We start by normalizing discomfort. At Midland State, our raw training includes modules on dialogue across difference, but we also bring in student activists and community mediators to co-lead. We found that students are more open when the facilitator isn't just the authority, but someone who's lived the complexity. We call these sessions Brave Hall Dialogues, because the goal isn't safety from hard truths. It's the courage to stay in the room.
We've learned that space matters. Physical space. At Brookhaven, we redesigned our common rooms with round layouts, movable furniture, even color and light choices that encourage vulnerability. We also host something called the Third Night Circle, a facilitated gathering held 3 nights into each semester, where students explore how their stories intersect. It's early enough to shape a culture, but just late enough that students have a few lived moments to reflect on.
At St. Bridget's, we believe that spiritual development includes moral courage. So we've incorporated justice dialogues into our residence hall liturgies and retreat programs. We don't separate faith from social consciousness. And our RAS are taught to see conflict not as failure, but as invitation. To listen. To grow. We remind students, this is not just where you live. It's where you learn to live together.
For the final question, if you could change one thing about residence life on every campus, what would it be?
Fund residence halls as learning environments, not just auxiliary enterprises. The budget should reflect the mission. Too often, housing is treated like a business unit, focused on occupancy rates and revenue. But if we want the dorm to be a classroom, we have to invest accordingly. Faculty engagement stipends, raw leadership training, integrated programming budgets. Learning doesn't stop when students leave the lecture hall, and neither should our support.
Bring faculty back into the dorms, not as supervisors, but as neighbors and co-learners. The presence of a faculty in residence can transform a hallway into a salon, or a casual dinner into an intellectual spark. But it only works if faculty are invited as full participants in community life, not hall monitors, not guest speakers, but residents with a stake in the living learning culture. It's about dissolving the divide between academic and residential life.
Treat the residence hall as a place of spiritual growth, not just academic or social development. A home for the whole person. That means designing for reflection as much as stimulation. Quiet spaces. Restorative practices. Moments of pause in a world of pressure. At St. Bridget's, we believe the dorm should be a sanctuary where students can wrestle with who they are, what they believe, and how they want to serve the world.
The residence hall is often the first door a student opens. And what they find inside can shape not just their semester, but their sense of self. What we've heard today is clear. When we design residence life with intention, it becomes more than a place to sleep. It becomes a place to question, to collide, to grow, and to belong. When we fund it as a learning space, invite faculty in as neighbors, and honor it as a sanctuary for spiritual and moral reflection, we affirm that learning is not confined to classrooms. It is ambient, it is lived, it is shared. And what about Amina, the student we met at the beginning? By the end of her first year, she wasn't just attending dialogues, she was co-leading them. Her RA encouraged her to apply for the Global Citizenship Floor, where she helped plan an interfaith dinner and organized a dorm-wide book club on migration narratives. She stayed up late debating ethical design with her engineering major roommate. And when she left for summer break, she didn't pack up who she was. She carried it forward, fuller and more rooted than when she arrived. That's what the dorm can be. Not just a room, not just a bed, but the beginning of a life examined and a life empowered. Thank you for joining us for episode 4 of the Presidential Podcast on Student Affairs, The Dorm as Classroom. I have been your host, Maya Quinn, and we'll see you next time.